Whispers of the Ancients, Episode 7, The Moche, Warriors and Artists approximately 100 to 700 CE. Segment 1, Shores of Power, along the arid northern coast of ancient Peru, where rivers sliced narrow ribbons of life through desert valleys, rose a civilization both bold and brutal. The Moche they built. No empire in the traditional sense. No single ruler united vast territories. Yet their influence swept across the land, valley by valley, through artistry, technology, and domination. While others looked to the stars, the Moche looked to the earth, to the rivers, the soil, and the blood. This was a world of warriors, a world of craftsmen, a world where power was performed and preserved in clay, gold, and sacrifice. Segment 2, Unearthing the Moche. For centuries, the Moche were forgotten, buried beneath shifting sands and eroded temples. Their rediscovery began in the 20th century, but it was not scrolls or ruins that first revealed them. It was art. Thousands of finely sculpted vessels, often looted and sold across the world, bore the same faces, animals, gods, and scenes. Unlike many ancient cultures, the Moche painted their stories in clay, with shocking detail and vivid realism. Faces contorted with emotion, rituals and battles rendered with clinical precision, erotic scenes, mythic beasts, and elaborate processions, all told in fired ceramic. These were not decorative trinkets. They were a visual language, an archive of power, pleasure, and pain. Segment 3, Temples of Earth and Blood, the heart of Moche ceremonial life. Beat strongest at Huaca del Sol and Huaca de la Luna, the Temple of the Sun, and Temple of the Moon. Towering adobe pyramids, built layer by thousands of laborers, rose from the Moche capital near the Moche River Valley. Huaca del Sol once stood over 40 meters tall, among the largest adobe structures ever constructed in the ancient world. Here, rituals unfolded in thunderous rhythm. Priests in elaborate masks descended stepped platforms, the scent of blood mixed with incense, and the gods, it was believed, watched through painted murals, judging the offerings below. These temples were not just religious centers, they were political theaters where the spectacle of sacrifice and power reaffirmed social order. Segment 4, The Ritual of War. To understand the Moche is to confront their view of violence, not as chaos, but as cosmic necessity. Their art depicts warriors in highly ceremonial combat, armed with clubs, shields, and feathered helmets. They did not kill in battle. They captured. Prisoners were stripped, paraded, and ultimately sacrificed in ritual ceremonies. This was not cruelty for its own sake. This was cosmic maintenance. The blood of captives was an offering, nourishment for the gods who ensured rain, fertility, and life itself. War was a sacred duty. Sacrifice, a holy exchange. The Moche did not separate religion from governance nor myth from law. They ruled through fear, faith, and performance. Segment 5, Lords of Sipán. In 1987, archaeologists in the Lambai-Eek Valley made a discovery that would transform understanding of the Moche forever. They unearthed the tomb of the Lord of Sipán, a Moche noble buried in gold, copper, turquoise, and ceremonial splendor. He lay adorned with necklaces of peanuts, ear balls shaped like warriors, and a face mask that glinted with status. Around him, the bodies of retainers, a guard with amputated feet, a young woman, and a child spoke to his power in life and death. The tomb was untouched by looters, a rarity, offering scholars an unspoiled glimpse into Moche hierarchy, belief, and wealth. This discovery, often likened to the tomb of Tutankhamun, confirmed what the art had long whispered. The Moche elite were gods on earth, or so they were portrayed. Segment 6, Masters of Metal and Clay. Moche society reached technological heights that rivaled the finest artisans of the ancient world. They were pioneers in metallurgy, centuries before the Inca would rise. Their metalworkers could alloy gold, silver, and copper into intricate ornaments, masks, and weapons. They used lost wax casting and sophisticated smelting techniques, producing ceremonial regalia that still gleams after over 1,000 years. Equally astonishing was their mastery of ceramics. Moche pottery is among the most lifelike in the ancient Americas. realistic portrait heads, dynamic warriors, scenes of sex, sacrifice, and storytelling, all sculpted with expressive finesse. Their stirrup-spout vessels, shaped with elegant functionality, became symbols of identity, trade, and power. Each pot was a canvas, each piece a messenger of memory, myth, and meaning. Segment 7. Life along the river valleys. Despite the harsh desert landscape, the Moche engineered prosperity in the face of scarcity. They built canals that carried river water across dry plains, turning arid earth into fertile farmland. Along these irrigated valleys, they grew maize, beans, squash, and peanuts. They cultivated cotton for fine textiles and fished the rich Pacific waters for anchovies and sea life. Llamas carried goods across the Andean spine, linking valleys in networks of trade. Daily life in Moche villages was structured and hierarchical. The elite lived near ceremonial centers, the laborers and farmers farther away. Each valley had its own ruling class, local lords who may have aligned through marriage, warfare, or ritual alliances. Rather than conquest, it was a patchwork society, loosely held together by shared beliefs and visual culture, not a centralized empire. Segment 8. Gods of War and Water. The Moche pantheon reflected the world they knew, fierce, unpredictable, and alive with dualities. At the center of their mythology stood powerful deities, the Decapitator, often portrayed with a feline face, talons, and a severed head in one hand, symbolized sacrifice and renewal. The moon goddess, associated with fertility and night, may have held dominion over the feminine and the cycles of life. Other beings, part human, part animal, ruled over weather, war, and the underworld. Animals played sacred roles. Owls guided souls to the afterlife. Felines represented strength and status. Spiders and serpents symbolized transformation and mystery. These were not abstract ideas. They appeared everywhere in murals, metalwork, textiles, and especially in pottery. Religion infused every aspect of Moche life, from planting seasons to courtroom judgments, blending the spiritual and the practical in one seamless worldview. Segment 9. Collapse in the sand. By the 7th century, the brilliance of the Moche began to dim. But what caused their fall? The answer lies partly in the climate. The Moche were deeply tied to the cycles of nature. So when those cycles broke, they broke with them. Evidence points to massive El Niño events, floods that destroyed irrigation systems, followed by years of drought. Their world, once sustained by human ingenuity, became unpredictable and hostile. As food became scarce and rivers turned against them, society fractured, temples were abandoned, rulers lost divine favor, the bond between people and gods unraveled. And yet, the Moche didn't vanish overnight. Some communities adapted, others merged into rising cultures, such as the Lambai Ik and later the Chimu. But the golden age of Moche artistry and ritual power slowly sank beneath the shifting sands. Segment 10. Echoes of the Moche. Today, the Moche live on, not just in museums, but in the soil, the rivers, and the cultural DNA of Peru. Their legacy is preserved in the artifacts left behind, the death, masks, the vivid ceramics, the buried kings, and in the people who now protect these stories, archaeologists, indigenous descendants, and artists alike. The Moche challenge us to rethink power, to see art not as luxury, but as law, to recognize that stories, told in clay or blood, shape the soul of civilization. In their mastery of war and worship, they crafted a world both beautiful and brutal, a civilization that gazed not into the stars, but into the human face and dared to mold it in immortal form. Segment 11. Architecture without words. Unlike later Andean empires, the Moche left no written language, no codices, no glyphs, no carved declarations of conquest or laws. Their stories and systems were told through form, color, and clay. Their architecture followed the same language, silent but intentional. Moche cities were often centered around huacas or sacred pyramids, built with millions of adobe bricks. Each hand-molded and marked by individual communities, these temples were layered with purpose. Each new ruler added to the pyramid, creating a vertical history. encasing past generations within the rising structure. Residences were tiered by class. Elite compounds included courtyards, workshops, and storerooms, decorated with symbolic iconography. Commoners lived in simpler mud brick dwellings. Closer to the irrigation canals and fields, there were no city walls, no centralized capital. Instead, sacred geography, mountains, rivers, and pyramids defined the spiritual landscape. Power in Moche society was not broadcast through writing. It was performed, built, and buried. Segment 12, Gender, Power, and Ceremony. One of the most striking revelations in modern archaeology is the role of women in Moche society. In 2006, at the site of San Jose de Moro, archaeologists uncovered richly adorned female burials. These were not mere consorts or noblewomen, but priestesses, dressed in headdresses, beads, and ceremonial garments. These women were laid to rest with ceremonial goblets and offerings. Their burial positions mirrored scenes from Moche iconography, where priestesses conducted blood rituals and presided over elite rites. This challenged long-held assumptions that Moche society was exclusively male-dominated. It suggested a duality of power, where religious authority, at least, included women at the highest level. Moche rituals were thus not only expressions of hierarchy, but of gendered balance, with men and women performing interwoven roles in sacred ceremonies. It is a subtle but profound window into a culture more nuanced than the warrior mask it often wears. Segment 13. The Moche beyond borders. Though rooted in the valleys of northern Peru, Moche influence rippled outward. Their art and ceramics have been found across broad distances, suggesting trade routes that connected them with other Andean cultures. These interactions may not have been political, but cultural exchanges, a flow of goods, symbols, and possibly even ideas. Some scholars believe the Moche visual language may have influenced later societies, including the Chimu and even the Inca. The Inca absorbed much from prior Andean civilizations, metallurgy, agricultural terraces, road systems, and though the Moche were long gone by the time of Inca rise, their aesthetic and ritual DNA persisted. In this way, the Moche did not vanish. They were woven into the tapestry of later civilizations, their echoes still heard in gold, in clay, and in the rituals of Peru's descendants. Segment 14. Interpreting a silent civilization. The greatest challenge with understanding the Moche is that they never spoke to us directly. Not in writing, not in preserved language. Every theory about their politics, religion, or collapse must be pieced together from material culture, from pots, bones, murals, and tombs. We rely on context. We analyze burial positions, the orientation of temples, the layering of ruins. We read symbolism carved in metal and painted on walls. This makes interpretation both thrilling and perilous. What looks like war may be a dance. What appears as sacrifice may be myth. What we see as hierarchy may have been ritual performance. Every pot is a puzzle. Every mural, a metaphor. Every skeleton, a silent witness. The Moche left us no certainty, only evidence and an invitation to look closer. Segment 15. The legacy of the Moche today. Modern Peru is home to many descendants of pre-Columbian cultures, and the legacy of the Moche is carefully preserved and studied by scholars and communities alike. Museums such as the Royal Tombs of Sipán Museum house the stunning treasures of ancient Moche rulers. Conservationists fight to protect endangered sites from looting and erosion. Local schools teach the heritage of the Moche, not just their warfare, but their art, agriculture, and beliefs. New generations of Andean artists are inspired by Moche ceramics. Ceremonial traditions, once silenced, are now remembered and reinterpreted. For many, the Moche are no longer an abstraction, but a cultural inheritance proudly reclaimed. The Moche remind us that civilization does not always speak in letters or stone. It can whisper in pigments, echo through tombs, and speak centuries later, through the hands of a potter or the gaze of a mask. In remembering them, we remember something timeless, that to builder. Civilization is not just to survive, but to express, to perform, to create. Segment 16. Huaca de la Luna, Temple of Power, One of the greatest surviving Moche monuments is the Huaca de la Luna, the Temple of the Moon, built against the Cerro Blanco mountain. This massive adobe pyramid wasn't just a religious sanctuary, it was the heart of ritual life. Over 6 levels, added over centuries, Moche priests conducted ceremonial sacrifices, offered tributes, and summoned divine power. Its walls are decorated with preserved murals, vividly painted with gods, serpents, decapitations, and mythical animals. The most famous among them is the fearsome deity known as Ayapic, the decapitator god. Ayapic appears with fanged teeth, feline features, and a staff or blade. Often shown grasping the severed heads of captives, he represented cosmic balance, but also divine wrath. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence of ritual sacrifice in the temple's courtyard. Bodies of young men decapitated or killed in ceremonial duels. These may have been prisoners of war, chosen warriors, or elite individuals offered to maintain harmony with the gods. But Huaca de la Luna was more than death. It was a place of cosmic renewal, where blood flowed not for cruelty, but for sacred order. Every layer of the temple represents centuries of spiritual belief, sealed in sun-dried clay, pigment, and silence. Segment 17. The Artisans of Myth and Matter. In the Moche world, art was sacred. Potters were not just craftsmen, they were visual historians, philosophers, and perhaps even priests. In their own right, using fine clay and keen observation, they created vessels shaped like humans, gods, animals, and scenes of daily life. Their work was astonishingly realistic, capturing wrinkles, expressions, even deformities. Some figures are smiling, others grimacing, some serene in meditation. Each face tells a story, frozen in time. They also made narrative ceramics, painted with scenes of mythology, sex, war, sacrifice, and healing. The Moche seem to have documented their world in images. One pot might show a fisherman casting a net, another, a prisoner bound in rope, another still, a ritual where priests drink the blood of a slain warrior. These weren't just decorations, they were messages broadcast to the gods and to the dead. The finest ceramics were often buried with the elite, never meant for everyday use. In death as in life, they communicated status, belief, and memory. Through their hands, the Moche built a visual language that outlived their voices. Segment 18. Collapse in the shadows. By the late 6th and early 7th centuries, the Moche world began to unravel. Archaeological layers show evidence of massive flooding, followed by intense droughts. The mighty irrigation canals cracked, crops failed, hunger spread. Climate, once a source of life, turned hostile. But environmental stress wasn't the only pressure. Evidence of internal conflict also emerges. Burned temples, shattered ceramics, abandoned cities. Did rival factions fight over dwindling resources? Did the people lose faith in their leaders or rituals? Some scholars believe the very symbols of Moche power, sacrifice, divine kingship, elite control began to collapse under the weight of crisis. The gods once fed with blood perhaps stopped answering. By around 700 CE, the great ceremonial centers were abandoned. The temples fell silent. The potters and priests laid down their tools. The Moche civilization as we know it came to an end. But their legacy, like their painted pots, was too vivid to vanish. Segment 19. The Inheritance of the Andes. After the Moche disappeared, the Chimu, Lambaik, and eventually the Inca rose in the Andes. Each borrowed from those who came before. The Chimu built great adobe cities like Chan Chan, reminiscent of Moche architectural styles. Their metalwork and ceramics carried echoes of Moche craftsmanship. Even the Inca, though distant in time, inherited the concept of sacred rulership, road building, and cosmic order that had evolved over centuries in the Andean world. The Moche were not alone in shaping this heritage, but they were among its boldest architects, mixing artistry, violence, and reverence in ways that still fascinate the modern world. In every shard of pottery, every golden ornament, every adobe brick baked in the desert sun, they left a piece of themselves, a message waiting to be read. Segment 20. Reflections in Clay and Time. Today, on the dry coasts of northern Peru, the wind brushes over crumbling walls and broken temples,
Tourists visit Huaca de la Luna. Scholars decipher Moche iconography. Local communities celebrate their ancestry through festivals and preservation. The Moche live on, not as a vanished people, but as an enduring voice in the history of human creativity. Their civilization reminds us that greatness is not measured only in conquest or empire, but in how a culture sees itself and how it dares to express what it fears, loves, and believes. The Moche were warriors, they were artists, they were poets of clay, and though time has stolen their words, their hands still speak, through vessels and murals, through bones and temples. The Moche continue to whisper across centuries, telling us who they were, and asking, who are we?